Hey, Steve. You're a bit early. Hi, Rick. How are you? I'll be with you guys in a minute. Just need to share a little bit more. Hi, Stacy. Well, I'm hearing funny sounds. I don't know why. Is that on my system? Hey, look at all those hearts. That's pretty cool. Can everybody hear me now? You should be able to. I think that was noise on Facebook. When I turned off the Facebook sounds, I didn't have any more problem. Well, hi, Steve. Hi, Rick. Avro, or Carmen, alias Avro. Stacy, hi, how are you? Steve Wolfbrant, Deborah Wilson, how you doing? And Dolores, hello to you. Deborah, thank you for sharing, everybody. I couldn't get a lot of sharing done myself. For some reason, my shares would not scroll down. My share page would not scroll down. I don't know why. I couldn't get to all my groups. I couldn't even get there through Messenger. It was very strange. Anyway, Facebook's been strange lately. Hi, Alana. Okay, so thanks for as much sharing as you can do. So, when I was preparing for tonight's show, I realized it just sort of hit me. Boy, these people are just so depraved. One of the articles I cited was Uncommon Dreams. It was by Owen Higgins. The title of it was They're Playing With Us. Anger with GOP growing as $600 unemployment benefit lapses. And boy, this was really predictable. The article says, okay, that Americans are angry with inaction from the Republicans in the Senate and President Donald Trump on extending $600 a week unemployment benefits. And they're accusing the government of not living up to its responsibility to care for the public during the COVID-19 pandemic, as the boost in aid expired on Friday. Now, I don't know why Americans weren't absolutely livid before, because it seems to me the even more serious failure of the government to live up to its responsibility to care for the public during the pandemic has been in connection with fighting the pandemic itself. As of this morning, on one of the statistic sites that I frequent, the number of deaths had risen to 157K, and deaths per million had gone up to 475 or 476 deaths per million, according to the Worldometer site that I frequently refer to here. I'm going to double check that for you, but it seemed to me that that was the situation. Let me refresh the page. Yeah, so at the Worldometer site, the USA is at 477 deaths per million. And the total deaths were at almost 158,000, 157,898. 1,120 new deaths overnight. Gee. So, they've been playing with us not only with respect to the unemployment benefit, they've been playing with us much more seriously when it comes to doing something about the COVID-19 crisis. Trump basically maintains his stance that the feds are not going to handle it, that it's the responsibility of the state governments to handle it. And a story about that just surfaced, which we'll go over. But can you imagine turning it over to the states? 158,000 Americans are dying. That's more Americans than died in the Vietnam War. And as I recall, it's more Americans that died in the Korean War, too. And in the First World War. The only wars in which we have suffered more deaths than we have from the coronavirus have been in the Civil War, okay, and in World War II. That's how bad this is. The government has not been living up to its responsibility to care for the public. The article goes on, quote, "In the middle of this pandemic, they're playing with us," said by Candida Kevorkian, 53-year-old California woman, relying on the payments to survive. And she said that to the Washington Post on Saturday. Of course, you know the benefits came out of the CARES Act in late March, but they only ran until the end of July. Why that expiration date was, the end of July. Why didn't but Nancy Pelosi fight for a longer time period, especially since it was known at the time it was going to take people some time to get through the state unemployment systems, which it did. So for many people, they weren't even really getting money until June sometime, and the program was due to expire at the end of July. Anyway, House Democrats approved the HEROES Act, a $3 trillion stimulus package. I don't know if I'd call it a stimulus package, but an extension of the unemployment benefit boost in late May. But Republican lawmakers in the Senate, led by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, took no action on the bill. Instead, Mitch McConnell said, I want to put things on pause and let's see what happens. We'll put things on pause. There's no urgency. There's no urgency about doing anything. And when Nancy Pelosi's bill hit in late May, there was no urgency then. The GOP lawmakers in the Senate were just too busy. Finally, they developed, just about a week back, they presented a competing bill known as the HEALS Act last month that cut the extended unemployment payment to $200 a week. That legislation was dead on arrival, however, not even generating necessary support within the Republican caucus due to the level of spending in that bill. So thus we saw a situation develop where to pass any bill, it was necessary for the Republicans to have the support of the Democratic caucus, because too much of their own caucus, 20 to 25 senators, didn't want to pass any more stimulus. They wanted the economy to fall off the cliff, or their ideology led them to believe that if you just left it alone, it wasn't going to fall off the cliff. The White House and the GOP Senate leadership floated a one-week extension for the benefits, but Nancy Pelosi said, nothing doing. And I think she was right about that. It was rejected by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on Thursday evening. And of course, Chuck Schumer basically said, you'll never get it out of the Senate because not enough Democrats are going to join with you to float it. Anyway, Pelosi said to reporters on Friday, we recognize the gravity of the situation. They don't. Jeff Stein of the Washington Post reported, sounds like some progress on negotiations today. Here's what Secretary Mnuchin told reporters in the mix, specifics unclear. There's a fix on unemployment insurance. There's progress on eviction moratorium, on more dollars for the payment protection program for businesses. There's some more agreement on schools and child care dollars. And he mentioned McConnell's demand on liability protections for businesses. Of course, the unemployment dollars and the eviction moratorium have already expired. And Mnuchin didn't say what was going to happen with the liability demand, but reports say that Trump is ready to give that up, that he's ready to give that up. But that's what Mitch McConnell wanted. Supposedly, that was Mitch McConnell's red line. I don't know if that's still going to be the case, because Mitch McConnell can't pass any bill, and the president wants a bill in the worst way right now because he sees any chance he may have before re-election going up in smoke if there's no relief here. If he and the Republicans have to bear the burden of being the ones to blame, and of course, according to this article, they are the ones who are going to get blamed. Sherrod Brown, who's a Democratic senator from Ohio, of course, said to MSNBC Friday night, the choice to leave town was inexplicable, and urged his Republican colleagues, to negotiate a workable solution to the ongoing crisis with the House Democrats. And of course, this is a reference to the fact that while the negotiations are reportedly ongoing, the Republican-led Senate nonetheless adjourned for the weekend on Thursday. That was a move that looked terribly, terribly bad. It was a stupid move from a PR point of view, and certainly led to people saying, the Republicans are playing with us. They're playing with us. There's a quote from Sherry Brown here. He says, I hear senators make $175,000 a year complaining that these, quote again, lazy workers are getting so much money, unquote, and unquote again, said Brown. And quote again, people haven't sunk into poverty in significant numbers at all during this pandemic because of the $600 a week, unquote. Well, maybe they haven't sunk into poverty in significant numbers during the pandemic, but they've been on the cliff. They've been teetering on the edge because it hasn't been enough. It hasn't been enough. The fix is simple. New Haven single mom, 38-year-old, whose name is Raven Holmes, told the Post, quote, that money is not a resource that can be depleted. It's a man-made thing. If you need more, make more, unquote. That's what Raven Holmes said. She knows the government makes the money. And she added, quote, there are other countries, their citizens are fine, nobody is suffering, and everybody is healthy, she added. All our government wants is money in their pockets, while the people are poor and starving and scrounging, unquote. Our sentiments exactly. When people start getting the feeling the government is playing with them, that is dangerous. It's a formula for more people in the streets. It's a formula for the BLM protests to morph into a total class war. A total class war. And then, of course, there's the person who is reportedly at this point the leading choice for the VP nomination. So, what I'd like to do is to access an American Prospect article that appeared, I think, a couple of days ago, that reviewed Kamala Harris's record. and I want to remind myself of it. I had it up on my other computer, but not on this one. So I had to log in. I had to sign in to the American Prospect site unexpectedly and try to bring up the article. I don't generally take my mail on this machine. So, if you'll excuse me for just another moment, I should have access to my email, which I need to get the link that I'm looking for. Okay. So here we are. There was an article in the American Prospect with a very plaintive picture of Harris. Oh, she looks just so empathetic. She must not have been laughing about how she put it to the mothers in the San Francisco area. This article was written by Alexander Salmon on July 30th. And it's entitled How Kamala Harris Fought to Keep Nonviolent Prisoners Locked Up. We all know some of this story. But the article starts off pointing out that she repeatedly and openly defied U.S. Supreme Court orders to reduce overcrowding in California prisons while serving as the state's Attorney General, according to legal documents reviewed by the Prospect. Working in tandem with Governor Jerry Brown, I mean, how depraved can you get, right? Harris and her legal team filed motions that were condemned by judges and legal experts as obstructionist, bad faith, and nonsensical. At one point, even suggesting that the Supreme Court lacked the jurisdiction to order a reduction in California's prison population. Now, what a cynical move is that? She's a lawyer. She took constitutional law. She certainly knows that the Supreme Court does not lack the jurisdiction. The intransigence of this legal work resulted in the presiding judges in the case giving serious consideration to holding the state of California, not Mississippi, the state of California, in contempt of court. Observers worried that the behavior of Harris's office had undermined the very ability of federal judges to enforce their legal orders at the state level, pushing the federal court system to the brink of a constitutional crisis. This extreme resistance to a Supreme Court ruling was done to prevent the release of fewer than 5,000 nonviolent offenders, whom multiple courts had cleared as presenting next to no risk of recidivism or threat to public safety. Despite a straightforward directive from the Supreme Court to identify prisoners for release over a 2-year period, upholding a 2009 ruling that mandated the same action over the same timeline, the state spent the majority of that period seesawing back and forth between dubious legal filings and flagrant disregard. By early 2013, it became clear that the state had no intention to comply, leading to a series of surprisingly combative exchanges. This is the person that reportedly Joe Biden wants to make the vice president of the United States. What happens when the Supreme Court rules against her? If she becomes the president, what happens if the Supreme Court rules against her? Is she going to fail to obey then, like Donald Trump? Are we getting another Donald Trump on our hands? While Harris's ultimately unsuccessful presidential campaign saw questions raised about her criminalization of truancy and her tough-on-crime reputation during her time as San Francisco's district attorney, her role in California's prison reduction case largely flew under the radar, though it was decried at the time. As concerns grow about Donald Trump's subversion of the law, he, along with his Attorney General William Barr, is currently defying a Supreme Court ruling by refusing to restart the DACA program. The potential Democratic vice presidential nominee engaging in relatively similar obstinacy is jarring. I agree with Salmon. It's really jarring. Senator Harris's office has yet to respond to a set of questions from the prospect. How did Harris's office turn a simple court order to release low-risk prisoners to prevent cruel and unusual punishment into a constitutional fiasco? I'm telling you, the problem with Kamala Harris is she is a mean girl. That was the problem with Hillary Clinton. A mean girl as president will make another mean president. At this juncture in the United States, we do not need another mean president. We do not need someone who is troubled, or maybe I should say untroubled, by her own depravity. Federal courts seldom look to prisoner release. It's a remedy of last resort. But California was a unique case with its uniquely awful prison system. At its height, it was stuffed to some 200% of its design capacity. Imagine. 200% of its design capacity. There were not enough beds or medical personnel, but an extreme excess of bodies. In one prison, 54 prisoners shared a single toilet. Preventable deaths due to substandard and overstretched medical care occurred every 5 to 6 days. And this was before COVID. Suicidal inmates were locked in telephone booth-sized cages for 24 hours at a time. For nearly 2 decades, Republican and Democratic administrations essentially ignored the problem. Despite constitutional protections for prisoners against cruel and unusual punishment enshrined in the Bill of Rights, finally in 2009, a federal district court found that no other plausible solution existed for getting the state to conform to a constitutionally reasonable standard rather than a forced prisoner release. An earlier pledge given before Harris's time to quickly build new prisons was not seen as credible. especially amid the Great Recession and California's limited finances. The district court mandated that the state enact a series of decarceration measures to reduce the prison population to 137.5% of its design capacity within 2 years. The state appealed the ruling of the district court, and on May 23, 2011, the Supreme Court found in Brown versus Plata that California's prison system was in violation of its prisoners' Eighth Amendment rights. Despite its relatively conservative tilt, the court identified prisoner release as the most effective method for ending the state's constitutional violation in a timely manner. The verdict split 5-4, with conservative Justice Anthony Kennedy joining the liberals on the court. Upholding a mandate of the lower court, Kennedy wrote the majority opinion in the case, including an array of gruesome details from inside those prisons and condemning the state for facilitating, quote, needless suffering and death, unquote, as he called it. At that point, Kamala Harris had been the state's attorney general for just over 4 months, representing California as its top legal officer. But the Supreme Court ruling would have to be enacted on her watch. Every 6 months, the state would have to show it had decreased its prison population in compliance with the threshold overseen by a 3-judge district court panel. 167% of capacity by the end of 2011, 155% by June of 2012, finally arriving at the target level of 137.5% by June 2013. It's beyond me why the court did not require arriving at the 100% level at some point, or at the 90% level to give a little extra room. But it didn't. It deemed that only being 37.5% over capacity was all right for the prison population to avoid cruel and unusual punishment, to avoid the violation of the Eighth Amendment rights, of the citizens. I think there's something depraved about that too, but it was certainly a start and would have been a great improvement. It soon became clear that the state would hold out on complying with the judicial order. 2011 passed with little progress made on the decarceration mandate, and by 2012 a report surfaced that proved the state actually intended to increase its prison population. They intended to defy the court order by increasing the prison population. In May of that year, you can't make this up, Harris's office, quote, confirmed their intent not to comply with the order, but instead to seek its modification from 137.5% design capacity to 145%. But by 2012, it hadn't even gotten down. It hadn't even gotten down to 155%. So 145%, this modification was not permitted by the court. The deadline for compliance was eventually extended to the end of 2013, so she got a 6-month extension from them. By April of 2013, just 2 months after the initial deadline given in that Supreme Court decision, California still had 9,636 prisoners more than the court-imposed ceiling, 9,636 people who no longer belonged in prison. The state submitted a proposal that involved relocating inmates to fire camps to fight wildfires and preventing out-of-state prisoners from being returned to the state. But upon review, the three-judge panel found that still left California's prisons some 4,170 prisoners over the hard limit. And by the way, the prisoners who were going to be sent to the fire camps to fight the wildfires, and who I believe were sent to fight the wildfires, were expected to fight those wildfires without any training for the princely sum of $1 per day. In fact, that's one reason why Harris wanted to keep them in the system, because she felt, well, the state felt, that they needed people to fight the wildfires, and they had these prisoners who were entitled to get out, but they needed to keep them to fight the wildfires at $1 a day. I'm sorry. That is depraved. That is depraved. Rather than do that, Harris should have gone to fight the wildfires herself. And I'm serious when I say that. After a series of back and forths, the three-judge panel arrived at a solution. The expansion of, quote, good time, quote, credits for nonviolent offenders, shortening stays often by just a handful of months. Even the state's own expert had testified years prior that he did not oppose good time credit measures, that there was no correlation between length of stay and recidivism, meaning the public was not at risk. Other states, Washington, Illinois, and even tough on crime New York, had implemented these programs with success. The court found good time credits alone would do more than enough to close the gap and solve the problem for good. Some 5,385 inmates were eligible for release under good time credits. But Governor Brown, with Harris as his defense lawyer, did not agree. Harris's office launched into a campaign of all-out obstruction, refusing to answer why they could not simply release low-risk, nonviolent inmates to conform to the Supreme Court's requests. Quote, defendants offered no explanation, however, why they could not release low-risk prisoners early, the June 13th ruling stated. But Harris's office didn't stop there. Instead, they claimed on behalf of the state that the Supreme Court had no jurisdiction to even request such a release, refusing to answer questions as to how they would implement the ruling of the Supreme Court and courting a constitutional crisis. That resulted in a stunningly sharp rebuke from the three-judge district court panel in the June 2013 ruling. When asked by what date the state should identify the list of prisoners who are unlikely to reoffend, quote, defendants defiantly refused, unquote, the judges wrote. And quote again, quote, and stated somewhat astonishingly that our suggestion that we might order defendants to develop a system to identify low-risk prisoners, a system the Supreme Court had suggested we might consider ordering defendants to develop, quote, without delay, unquote, is a prisoner release order that vastly exceeds the scope of any of the court's prior orders, unquote. The Supreme Court, in fact, ruled that the three-judge district court had exactly that authority in its 2011 ruling, quote, in tortured logic, unquote. The district court continued, quote, defendants suggested that the Supreme Court statement, quote, did not authorize the early release of prisoners, unquote, or even the consideration of that question, unquote. Harris's Attorney General's office, the ruling added, quote, continually equivocated regarding the facts and the law, to the point that the panel strongly considered holding the state in contempt They rejected that action only because it would have delayed the release of nonviolent inmates even further and aided the state's obstructionist campaign. This court would therefore be within its rights to issue an order to show cause and institute contempt proceedings immediately, the ruling reads. And quote again, our first priority, however, is to eliminate the deprivation of constitutional liberties in the California prison system. To do so, we must first ensure a timely reduction in the prison population, unquote. So, one of the major grievances we've all been feeling these last few weeks is the deprivation of the constitutional rights of the citizens of Portland since Donald Trump sent in his federal agents. But here we go. The person the other party is considering nominating for vice president is a person who willfully deprived the constitutional liberties of people in the California prison system by keeping them as prisoners when she had no right to do so. Depraved, I say. Depraved. Harris, of course, was acting on behalf of the state's governor, who preceded her as state AG and was notorious for his posture on this issue as well. But she might have chosen not to defy the Supreme Court. Her legal work in particular not only drew ire from the court, it also raised eyebrows among observers. Quote, defiance of the federal court order requiring the reduction of the California prison population is reminiscent of the Southern governors in the 1950s declaring their defiance of federal court desegregation orders, unquote. Erwin Chemerinsky, dean of the University of California, Berkeley Law School, told NPR at the time, quote, both were misguided efforts to undermine enforcement of the Constitution, unquote. Added Barry Crisberg, longtime president of the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, quote, the legal arguments that the state is putting forward make no sense, unquote. Meanwhile, The Atlantic was even more unsparing of Harris's behavior in this case, writing that her court filings are largely void of dispositive facts and unworthy of a first-year associate, much less the chief lawyer of our nation's most populous state, unquote. According to writer Andrew Cohn, Harris's behavior may have even put her in breach of California's legal and ethical standards, which forbid filing a motion, quote, for an improper purpose, such as to harass or cause unnecessary delay. Indeed, that particular behavior is condemned multiple times in the court's June 2013 ruling. Quote, defendants have repeatedly found new and unexpected ways to frustrate this court's orders, unquote. The three-judge panel decried and, quote, used this court's patience and good faith attempts to achieve a resolution as an excuse for protracting these legal proceedings to a time that could hardly have been imagined. Harris's work on that case alone would likely disqualify her from a shot at a federal bench or Supreme Court appointment, Cohn opined. And yet, we're supposed to believe that she's qualified to be the Vice President of the United States. Harris's use of the anti-desegregation playbook to prevent the release of low-level offenders ultimately failed. Finally, in 2014, the state acceded and the prison population was reduced. After 3 years of delay, 3 years of keeping people in prison beyond the time when they should have gotten out. Who's going to give them back those 3 years? This era of Harris's tenure as Attorney General escaped the recent close re-examination of some of the higher profile cases in her prosecutorial past. During her brief presidential run, a memo from the tail end of this battle resurfaced. In late 2014, lawyers from her office claimed that nonviolent offenders need to stay incarcerated, lest they lose bodies for fire camps in the wildfire-plagued state, as Jackie Kucinich, Dennis's wife, of the Daily Beast reported. Harris was quick to disavow the memo, claiming that she had no knowledge of it and telling BuzzFeed News she was, quote, shocked, unquote, by the argument. Lying again, right? We know she's a liar. Do we need another liar in the vice presidency and maybe in the presidency? But it squares firmly. I mean, Biden is bad enough. But it squares firmly with the sort of arguments her office was putting forward for multiple years preceding it. Harris, meanwhile, was known to run an extremely centralized attorney general's office with few things coming in or out without her express sign-off. With a ruling handed down from the country's highest court, this is one of the highest profile cases she managed in her role as attorney general. An extremely high-stakes case involving a decarceration order she spent years resisting is unlikely to have escaped her awareness. Of course, Harris has been criticized on multiple occasions for fighting to keep people, including innocent ones, in prison. In the case of Daniel Larson, an ex-felon sentenced to 27 years to life under California's three strikes law, Harris argued that even if Danny is innocent, his conviction should not be reversed because he waited too long to file his petition. According to the California Innocence Project, which took Larson's case, and while her trenchant opposition to decarceration of the state's prisons does align with those stories, her role in attempting to subvert the authority of the country's highest legal body for the sole purpose of preventing the release of a number of low-risk prisoners has gone largely unchallenged. Her role in blocking the Supreme Court's prison reduction order is deeply troubling on multiple counts. First, with the increased salience of criminal justice reform and the Black Lives Lives Matter era, a forceful opponent of decarceration on the ticket hardly conveys that the Democratic Party is on the side of racial justice. Pay attention, Joe Biden. Pay attention. A forceful opponent of decarceration on the ticket hardly conveys that the Democratic Party is on the side of racial justice. Hardly conveys that the Democratic Party is not equally as depraved as the Republican Party. Second, placing someone with a history of defying the Supreme Court on the Democratic ticket would significantly undermine Democratic nominee Joe Biden's pledge to return to the pre-Trump era of governance, where the three branches of government are seen as co-equal and the courts are respected. Biden's plans to name his running mate next week, he says. The importance of a vice presidential pick is often overblown. There's little reason to believe it can influence the outcome of a presidential election one way or the other. But of course, evidently the Biden campaign believes that somehow the appointment of Harris, who had no popularity whatsoever when she ran for president in the states of Virginia, Georgia, and Florida, that somehow the Biden believes that merely by nominating this black woman for the vice presidency, he will get a leg up in those states. He will be more popular among blacks in those states. Anyway, going on. There's little reason to believe that it can influence the outcome of a presidential election one way or the other. But given the stakes of this year's election and Trump's unique willingness to disregard the legal constraints on his office, elevating Harris would send a dubious message. And given Biden's spoken commitment to serve just one term, Harris would immediately slot in as the most powerful VP in modern history, primed for a presidential run as a quasi-incumbent if Biden does win in November. It's likely, too, given the age of liberal Supreme Court Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer, both in their 80s, that a Biden administration and or its successor will be in a position to appoint a number of judges, multiple judges. So, do we really want a mean girl appointing mean judges? Perhaps. If Harris had mounted a longer presidential campaign, these issues would have been raised on their own. But given her early departure, her record in some senses escaped a thorough vetting. In the time, I thought that her vetting was really quite successful. Her vetting by Tulsi Gabbard in, 2 minutes or something like that? That sort of put the nail in the coffin. In the time she's transitioned from presidential hopeful to vice presidential favorite, even some of her fiercest critics have changed their tune on her legacy. Last month, University of California law professor Lara Bazelon, who must be the daughter of the famous David T. Bazelon, very important justice during the, I don't know when he started, but like in the 1970s and 1980s, he was a giant on the bench. He never made the Supreme Court because the Republicans got control of the court, but he was a giant on the bench. Anyway, who penned a much talked about 2019 New York Times op-ed titled, quote, Kamala Harris was not a progressive but prosecutor, unquote, was quoted on NPR saying instead that Harris, quote, did champion progressive causes. What progressive causes? Her record has been consistent and it's been good, unquote. Sorry, Lara, don't believe you. But as Harris's work in the Plata case alone shows, that's far from the truth. She has not only been a frequent enemy of progressive causes, but she's opposed them in ways so dubious they threaten to undermine the very institutions in which she has served. If Harris is to be picked as the second highest ranking executive officer in the land, it's critical to have a full picture of her legacy as a lawyer and a politician. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party should be clear-headed about what message her elevation will send to the electorate about the party's priorities. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more with that. I could not agree more. So, more depravity. John Kelly had an article on July 31st in Common Dreams. Demands for Kushner to resign over, quote, staggering, unquote, the level of, quote, depravity, unquote, that put politics before public health. And Jared, in the wake of new reporting by Vanity Fair, a chorus of voices Friday called for the immediate resignation of Jared Kushner, a top White House advisor and son-in-law of President Donald Trump, for disastrous and deadly failures by the administration that appear to have put the political desires of the president above the public health needs of the American people. The Vanity Fair article takes an exhaustive look at decisions made and actions taken by a secretive task force led by Kushner that was charged with implementing and, quote, uh, um, uh, uh, and, quote, aggressive, coordinated national COVID-19 response, unquote, including a federal testing regime that would help stem the spread of the virus. What the investigation uncovered, according to reporter Catherine uh, Eban, was an ultimately aborted, quote unquote, plan for a far-reaching national testing strategy and a deliberative process that, quote, began not with public health experts, but with bankers and billionaires. While the plan itself, devised by the team Kushner put together, was characterized as, quote, imperfect, unquote, but quote, a starting point, unquote, the most shocking revelations have to do with why the strategy, which members of the unit believed would head straight to Trump's death and then be rolled out nationwide with large fanfare in the early part of April, suddenly seemed to disappear, like, quote, poof into thin air, unquote, said one participant in the effort. As Eban reports, the prospect of launching a large-scale national plan was losing favor, said one public health expert in recent contact with the White House's official coronavirus task force. Most troubling of all, perhaps, was a sentiment the expert said a member of Kushner's team expressed that because the virus had hit blue states hardest, a national plan was necessary and would not make sense politically. Quote, the political folks believed that because it was going to be relegated, that is the virus, to Democratic states, that they could blame those governors and that would be an effective political strategy, unquote. So this was a strategy to blame Cuomo and Gavin Newsom and Governor Murphy of New Jersey and other Democratic governors who were struggling to contain the COVID-19 virus without federal help. The article goes on. That logic may have swayed Kushner. Quote, it was very clear that Jared was ultimately the decision maker as to what plan was going to come out, unquote, the expert said. On April 27, Trump stepped to a podium in the Rose Garden, flanked by members of his coronavirus task force and leaders of America's big commercial testing laboratories, Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp, and finally announced a testing plan. It bore almost no resemblance to the one that had been forged in late March and shifted the problem of diagnostic testing almost entirely to individual states. While the veracity of such claims cannot be verified, and Kushner refused to answer a detailed set of questions or be interviewed by Vanity Fair, the implications of such a decision speak for themselves and drew immediate outrage and a demand for accountability. Claire Finkelstein tweeted, this is a total outrage. Jared Kushner commissioned and then abandoned a rational plan for dealing with hashtag COVID-19 because it would only affect blue states, or so they thought. Jared Kushner should resign. And that was a retweet of by Catherine Eban's tweeting out of her story. Quote, imagine the administration had intel on an imminent terrorist attack that would kill over 100,000 people and chose to do nothing because it was politically easier, tweeted Matt Duss, foreign policy advisor for Senator Bernie Sanders, on his personal account. Quote, that's what we have here. We need to be talking about accountability for all of it, unquote. Public Citizen tweeted, holy hell, Jared Kushner reportedly abandoned a national testing plan because it was, quote, politically advantageous, unquote. to sit back and let blue states be eviscerated by the virus. The corruption and depravity is simply staggering. Kushner needs to resign now. Quote, so the White House made the explicit decision that it was a better political call to let people die in the blue states and blame the governors than try to fix the testing situation, unquote. Responded Josh Marshall of Talking Points memo. And Wajahat Ali, an op-ed contributor to the New York Times, indicated the seriousness of these accusations against Kushner should not be ignored. Quote, Jared Kushner has blood on his hands, Ali stated. Quote again, and we should talk about this today, unquote. According to Duss, simply voting Trump out of office in November would not count as holding administration officials responsible for this kind of behavior. Quote, no, losing the election doesn't qualify as accountability, said Duss. And quote again, over 100,000 Americans try 157,985. Over 100,000 Americans are dead because of these people's incompetence and viciousness. I know the idea of prosecuting the previous administration makes some uncomfortable. Time to start getting over that, unquote. It is time. Okay. It is time. 3 examples of depravity by our ruling elites. More. Norman Solomon reports why Bernie Sanders delegates should keep fighting. Polls in swing states show 12% of Sanders supporters do not plan to vote for Biden. Even now, they do not plan to vote for Biden. And Norman Solomon says, as a Bernie Sanders delegate to the Democratic National Convention beginning August 17th, I feel 2 main responsibilities. One is to help defeat Donald Trump. The other is to keep fighting hard for a progressive agenda. With the presidential election looming, those goals might seem to conflict, but they don't. Conventional political wisdom says now is the time to set aside differences and simply rally behind the presumptive nominee. Quote, by unity is the drumbeat, unquote, from the Democratic Party leadership, but genuine unity, the kind that pays off against Republicans at election time, can't be forced. It must be actively created. 4 summers ago, the warning signs were abundant for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Overconfidence and thinly veiled hostility toward the left, but glossed over and shrugged off the disaffection among Sanders supporters, especially young voters. Instead of selecting a vice presidential candidate who might attract progressives, Clinton chose a pillar of the Democratic establishment, Senator Tim Kaine. Today, the many burners are frustrated and angry. It's not only that hopes for a Sanders nomination and presidency were abruptly dashed, more corrosive and significant is a common feeling, is a common feeling that despite his recent nods leftward, Biden remains largely oblivious to social imperatives, most notably in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic, Medicare for all. Virtually every exit poll of Democratic primary voters this year reflected strong majority support for Medicare for all, often by lopsided margins, even in conservative states. National polling has continued to show that 2/3 of all registered voters want Medicare for all. But even more than that, 88% of registered Democratic voters, Democratic Party voters, has shown 88% of Democratic voters want Medicare for all. While Biden is now calling for a public option that would be an improvement on the 10-year-old Affordable Care Act, he hasn't budged from his opposition to making Medicare universal at a time when tying medical coverage to jobs has been exposed as a grim travesty. A new study says that 5.4 million American workers lost their health insurance due to losing their jobs between February and May. And then what happened in June and July? How many more millions have lost their health insurance in June and July? While touting his Build Back Better program, he declared, Biden did, in a July 9th speech, quote, "Let's finish the job of Obamacare by ensuring everyone has access to quality, affordable health care. By clinging to time-worn and invasive buzzwords like access and affordable, Biden affirmed his alignment with the multi-trillion-dollar healthcare industry more than with Americans who want healthcare to be treated as a human right in reality instead of in mere rhetoric." Now, for a long time, I've been talking here about the numbers of people who die due to lack of health insurance. That program is even more acute in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. How depraved is it? How depraved is it for Biden to cling to his Improve the Affordable Care Act position, knowing that, one, he's aligning himself with the healthcare industry, accepting their donor money, and condemning thousands of Americans to death. His optimistic guess is that his plan would still leave 10 million Americans uncovered. That means about 12,000 deaths per year, avoidable deaths due to lack of health insurance, that Biden is committing to by choosing his plan over Medicare for all. That, my friends, is depraved. Just as Biden's chances of winning the presidency would improve if he embraced Medicare for all, his prospects would also be enhanced by adopting popular positions that are especially important to racial minorities. For instance, he could do the right thing by finally supporting the legalization of marijuana, which would be a major step toward ending racist law enforcement practices. Young African Americans share with other young people a distinct lack of enthusiasm and a likelihood of low turnout for Biden. And by the way, Joe, Kamala Harris is not going to help you with this younger demographic, black or otherwise. A similar problem exists with Latino voters who heavily backed Sanders in the 2020 primaries and caucuses. While the former vice president can take comfort in recent polling among Sanders supporters that looks better than previous survey data, even current poll numbers in swing states indicate that 12% of Sanders supporters do not plan to vote for Biden in the general. In those states, such voters could make all the difference. The imperative of defeating Trump, says Norman Solomon, calls for Biden to adopt progressive positions that appeal to disaffected voters and have majority support nationwide. That means Sanders supporters should keep the pressure on. I would say that means Medicare for All supporters should keep the pressure on, because that group is now a broader group than Sanders supporters, because a lot of Sanders supporters are now former Sanders supporters because of the harm that Bernie has done and still is doing to his brand every single day. Every single day, he's implicated in schemes to try to force his own Bernie delegates to toe the line and to give up their resistance on Medicare for All. And finally, one more piece, short now. I want to go over Dave Dayen's column today, titled State Unemployment Systems Need to be Federalized and Overhauled. Starting today, if you file a first-time unemployment claim, you will get the standard payment, but determined by your state system with no $600 federal enhancement. Congress knew that it put a deadline in place more than 4 months ago, had ample statistics showing how vital this boost was to maintaining some level of consumer spending, and they let it go anyway. Now that was depraved also. But I don't want to put an equal blame on both sides with respect to the $600 federal enhancement anyway, because the Democrats in May, as you know, towards the end of May, they passed the HEROES Act, which extended the federal unemployment enhancement until the end of the year. In my view, that was not enough time. They should have extended it for as long as the coronavirus crisis actually lasted, and some time beyond that. In fact, instead of providing the unemployment enhancement, what should have been in the HEROES Act was the Automatic Boost to Communities Act, giving everybody $2,000 per month for as long as the COVID-19 crisis actually lasted, and $1,000 a month for 1 year after that. Of course, this would have been in addition to state-level unemployment payments. So, that plan would have taken care of the unemployed and also given money to other people who are not in the employed workers pool, to housewives, to children. Children would have had a stipend of $1,000 a month for the COVID-19 crisis, the extent of the crisis, and $500 a month for 1 year thereafter, after the end of the crisis, as part of the ABC plan. That was better than the unemployment enhancement. But just keeping our eye on the unemployment enhancement for now, when that's all you did for people, other than the measly $1,200 stimulus payment, you had to pass that extension. Going on with the article, that it was inevitable that aid for individuals would be retracted prematurely, while aid for big business and investors would endure. Stocks went up yesterday, on the final day of the unemployment boost, is why I didn't like the CARES Act very much in the first place, says Dave. I take no pleasure in this vindication. That's why he thought the CARES Act, he thought that was a big fault in the CARES Act. I remember, and he was right, of course. We were all right. We all thought it was a flaw in the CARES Act. Among all the other hardships, we are now in a situation where if Congress does manage to reach a deal ever that includes a federal enhancement for unemployment, the state systems that are going to deliver it will have to turn back on that allowance after turning it off today. It took several weeks to get the $600 increase up and running, depending on the state. And if you have filed but not yet received the claim, there will be weeks with the $600 boost, weeks with zero, and down the road, weeks with the compromise number that Congress lands on, and weeks tied to an individual replacement rate if the Republicans have their way. These antiquated systems are definitely not equipped to give each individual, say, 70% of what they made before they were laid off. State unemployment systems don't even have that information. They're probably not equipped to shut down and turn on again and make sure everyone gets those varying amounts properly. And as what we're finding, they're not even equipped to process the level of claims received. California has offered some welcome transparency on its unemployment system. The nation's largest state has had the nation's largest number of claimants, having processed 8.7 million claims from March 8th to July 18th. That's amazing. One state. But increasing anger over delays and lack of communication led Governor Newsom to form a strike team, quote unquote, to identify solutions and deal with the backlog of claims. How big is that backlog? This information from the State Labor Secretary offers a clue. Since March, the Employment Development Department, EDD, has added nearly 5,000 new personnel, redirected more staff from other departments, created an online chatbot, a new call center, and more. But while in March, 87% of claimants received their payment within 2 weeks of filing, by June, that number had dropped to 52%. Currently, according to EDD, 1 in 5 unique claimants, 1.2 million Californians, have not been paid. Problems include identity verification, which must be mailed or faxed to EDD, and continued certification of eligibility, which must be done every 2 weeks. EDD has found at least 370,000 who haven't certified, and even after contacting them, only 221,000 did so. And to answer the question I posed earlier of what it would take to shut off federal benefits, reprogram them, and get those benefits out, the EDD chair said, quote, as long as 20 weeks, unquote, in California. Interestingly, bills don't stop coming for unemployed people in that period. Dave says, I don't mean to pick on California. The state is being upfront about its problem, which is more than can be said for many other states. The larger point is that this is an unacceptable delivery system for federal transfer payments. The states are not properly funding their systems, which almost certainly need to be federalized. We can design all sorts of innovative ways to get people past this crisis intact, but if we can't get the money into their hands quickly, it's not as meaningful. But the technology is more than available to enact real-time or near real-time payments to a Federal Reserve bank account set up for every American through their Social Security number. If I can take a picture of a check on my phone and have it deposited. If I can Venmo someone, we can make this service available for everyone with a one-time delivery of a debit card that can be endlessly reloaded. By the way, the provisions for doing this are already in the Automatic Boost to Communities Act. It was proposed by Rashida Tlaib and co-sponsored by Pramila Jayapal. It's in the act that can be endlessly reloaded, or a phone-based service doing the same. It's unacceptable that these systems are so neglected that they become unreliable precisely when they are needed. So, letting the benefit lapse in the way they did was depraved. They surely knew, the Republicans in Congress, and the Democrats too, surely knew that if they didn't meet the deadline, that was going to cause a number of weeks, maybe as much as 2 months, of zero payments, of zero extended payments, where people would suffer with only their state payments and no more, unable to make their rent, unable to properly feed their families, unable to economically survive, unable to pay their medical bills, unable to maintain their housing. And what did they do? They let it expire anyway. Why? Because the Republicans are playing with us and they are mean. They didn't have to accept the HEROES Act, lock, stock, and barrel, to come to the table, okay, and to negotiate something with the Democrats. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is always folding on something. Chuck Schumer is always folding on something. They could have gotten something for their side and not gone past this deadline and made people suffer. Why did they do it? Because they are among the elites who don't care, who are depraved when it comes to allowing and even promoting human suffering. And not simply human suffering, but the suffering of their fellow American citizens whom they have sworn to serve. Whom they have sworn to serve. Okay, it is despicable. Clearly, the Republicans are worse at this than the Democrats. There is no false equivalence here. They got to be thrown out. Every one of them, lock, stock, and barrel. They are all implicated in this. And Nancy Pelosi has some blame too. There's no question about it. She should have been haranguing them about this every week since the HEROES bill was passed. All the Democrats should have been pushing the Republicans every single week with stunts all across the country, making it clear to people that the barrier in extending these unemployment benefits and extending the eviction moratorium, that these things were due to the inaction of the Republicans, who thought there was no urgency about that. But they didn't do it. They didn't campaign on that basis. They didn't hit out at the Republicans continuously with a continuous drumbeat. It's terrible. It's depraved. Now let's see what you have to say. Before I take a look, though, I want to tell you about one thing. Okay, and that is what I'm going to be doing is trying out something new. Okay, in addition to these live streams. Okay, I'm going to reserve Monday for the new things I'm going to be doing. So my live stream starting next week will be from Tuesday through Thursday and on Saturday. What I'll be doing on Monday is, okay, I'm assuming I don't have any technical problems, okay, in doing this using the software I currently have. But what I intend to be doing is cutting videos, okay, on Mondays, and then releasing them but gradually throughout the week. The videos will be shorter. Okay, I'm not sure what to entitle these programs. As you know, this is the in-depth show. I need another title for the short videos. I'd like to enlist your help in thinking up the name for the short video program. The name I like so far is actually Progressive Short Takes. I'm not sure yet how short, okay, is going to be short, but it'll be, I suppose they'll be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. I'm shooting for that range for the video. So, starting next week, I'll be releasing 5 to 10-minute videos on Facebook and on YouTube, and maybe on other platforms as well. And I'll also be doing my live streams from Tuesday through Saturday, and Tuesday through Thursday and on Saturday. And Avril says neoliberalism, that's why. And Kay says, I hear the orange idiot is sending his brown shirts to Cleveland now. I don't know why my comment stream on StreamYard is starting at 9:44. Did I really not have any comments until 9:44? That's a little strange. So I'm going to go to Facebook and see what Facebook has to say. I'll also double check my sound and make sure it hasn't shifted. It did shift away. So I'll shift it back to my mic. That should get rid of any delay that you've been hearing. Lana says, yes, progressive short takes. Cheryl Ann Butler says, progressive talking points. I don't like that as well because I guess I like takes better. Talking points to me seems like something the centrists do. But I appreciate the suggestion. I encourage more suggestions. I may well find a better name. Keep trying, please. So Steve Wolfbrand said, the debate will reveal Biden's severe dementia. We are quite fucked. We may not be. We may not be because he did seem like he had severe dementia on when he was there during the debating season. But I seem to have noticed since that he seems to be in better control when he's talking. Maybe they've compensated with some medication or doing something for him, but he seems to be more in command of what he's saying these days. So maybe he's not going to fuck up, as bad. And even if he does, we have the situation he will if we have that situation, it may be Trump will be so far down that people won't care. Of course, it all depends on who he selects for his vice president. If his vice president is very unpalatable, it may be very bad indeed. Steve said they gave him some lines of cocaine. Laugh out loud. Kay says you missed the whole first comments. I'm trying to come back. Geez, Dr. Joe, you're at the tail end of the comments. I'm not sure where the comments have started. My Facebook stream doesn't seem to be in comment order. I'm not sure why. I'm going to see if I can get that the comment order back. Let me see. Let me see if I can get the regular comment order. Okay, guys, I just don't know where it starts. I'm going to have to start at 9:44, with Avril Mano saying that neoliberalism, that's why. Kay said after that, also at 9:44, I hear the orange idiot is sending his brown shirts to Cleveland now. And Steve Wolfbrand said, firefighter prisoners can't get jobs as firefighters when they get out because they're felons. Yeah. And Kay says, that is so wrong too, Steve. Greg Mallet says, to abolish the private prison industrial complex. Bonnie hands me a note. Biden said today, if Medicare for All comes up, he would vote no if he is president. Did he say that again today?
He said it today. Yeah.
What a crazy nincompoop. What a nincompoop he is. What a nincompoop. We have a nincompoop and a fascist criminal running for the presidency of the United States. We should have killed these zombie political parties long ago. They're just zombies from our point of view. They do not serve the people. They haven't for a very long time, and the people in general haven't had the guts to just vote against them. Cut off their heads, every last one of them. I mean, vote against them. If there's a third party running, vote in the third party. God, if you've got a third party choice, just vote third party. Kick them all out. I mean, they've really, both parties have got to be destroyed. Can you imagine 88% of your voters are saying they're for Medicare for All, and you say if it comes up, you're going to veto it? Are you out of your freaking mind? Cheryl Butler says, prisoners work as telemarketers too while in prison, taking payment information, but can't do that on the outside either. They're taking payment information? Great. Who are they passing that to? Steve Wolfbrand says, and abolish the war on drugs. Kay says, Biden says no to even pot. Greg says, hi, Greg, you haven't been around for a while. He says, yep, we need to end the failed war on drugs and abolish all agencies that continue carrying it out. Yep, Avril Romano says, otherwise known as Carmen, says, how can Biden justify picking Kamala for VP when she eviscerated him over that, quote, I was that little girl, unquote, performance at the debates? I don't know. That was so set up. It was such a setup. Now, I don't know if she was that little girl or if she wasn't that little girl. But that kind of setup, I mean, that's Madison Avenue all the way. Cheryl Ann Butler says, I used to work for a printing company in Portland years ago. We were a second chance employer and some of the most punctual and polite workers I have ever met worked there. Okay. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Margot Shepard said, hi, Louie. I love Dr. Joe every day. Thanks, Margot. Evelina says he secretly liked it. Evelina, then he's a freak for pain. Evelina says both of them are depraved. Cheryl Ann says, but maybe he will pick Nina after all.
No.
I don't think so.
She's too strong for him.
I don't think so. Because if she were the vice president and he had a misstep on the Green New Deal or Medicare for all, she'd lay him out right then and there.
Yeah.
And he can't cause her to lose her job. She's the vice president. The president can't fire the vice president. But Evelina says he like to cause it too. Oh, I see. He likes to cause it too. Cheryl Ann says, oh, I bet he does. Tara Reid's story makes me think he would get off on causing physical and emotional pain. Maybe. Steve says, much like Obama, Kamala is not a descendant of American slavery. Her father is Jamaican. Her mother is from India. I know. Steve Wolfbrand says, I believe Tara. I think a lot of us believed Tara, didn't we? Cheryl Ann Butler says, agreed. They can't be on the side of modern-day plantations and in the same breath claim to support BLM. And Louis the Fish Donolfo said, I shared this. Thank you, Louis the Fish. Steve Wolfbrand said, the shirts were printed before the debate. And Kay says, Harris wasn't even popular in California. Oh, Harris wasn't even popular in California. Yeah, I know she's not popular in California. She put so many people in jail who shouldn't have been there. Of course she wasn't popular. Cheryl Ann Butler says, wouldn't shock me if they were. Kay says, Kamala Harris. Stacy Van Veen says, the pussy-hatting Karens like Kamala. Yeah, she was a pussy-hatting Karen, wasn't she? Deborah Wilson said she would be awful. Stacy said, Mean Girl is too childish. She's a pre-fascist for real. Well, before she was a pre-fascist, she was a mean girl. And the way she's run her campaigns and the way she's acted, she's shown that she's a mean girl. She's cruel, unnecessarily cruel. And Joanne says Tulsi is preferable. Immensely preferable. Immensely preferable. I mean, Tulsi has class. Tulsi has charisma. Cheryl Ann Butler says, it's not something Republicans will be able to use against her, but it will keep the progressives from voting for her. Yes, it's not something Trump can use against Kamala. Avril says, we're making fun of Harris, calling her Kamalto. What's Kamalto? Steve Wolfbrand says, the evil laugh of Kamala is scary as shit. Yeah, it was very much like Hillary Clinton's evil laugh, wasn't it? Evelina says, I wonder what male VP Biden would go for if he could go for a man. I have no idea. I have no idea. But if he had any guts, he would have just appointed Bernie vice president. Okay, be done with it. He really wouldn't have lost any black votes if he appointed Bernie Sanders as vice president. If black votes are the worry, believe me, he wouldn't have lost any if he appointed Bernie Sanders. Of course, he might have lost some donors, but then again, he might have gotten hundreds of millions in contribution from small donors. Avril says, just like Hillary's. Steve says, yes, Avril, exactly the same laugh. Yeah. Margot says, I see it's the worst possible choice, so he will probably pick her. Exactly. And Cheryl Ann Butler says it probably Jeb Bush to pander to Republicans. Oh, God. Jeb Bush. Avril says, Kushner straight up wanted people to die via COVID without a second thought. And Claudette says, can't figure out why it keeps saying video won't play. I still come back. I don't know. Could be the computer. Could be the computer. Avril says, yep, the DNC/Biden are just that dumb. Steve Wolfbrand said, I still think Hillary will get in as VP. Oh, God. Yeah.
No.
I can just see something happening to Biden, Harris taking over as president, and then her choice for vice president. She will name someone to be the appointed vice president, okay, and ask the House to appoint the vice president, or the Congress to appoint the vice president to fill that office. And if the Democrats have control of the House and the Senate, that she will ask them to appoint Hillary as VP. Something like that could happen. On the other hand, I don't think Karen Bass would do that. Evelina says, persevere, laugh out loud. I don't think Barbara Lee would do that either. Cheryl Ann Butler says, good Lord, I hope not. And Avril says, slow Wi-Fi. Evelina says, it's very possible. And Cheryl Ann says, I get booted out a lot because my Wi-Fi sucks. I live in East the bumfuck Jabro. And Steve says, I've heard bumfuck is beautiful this time of year. Avril says, Kushner should be charged. Okay, Bonnie is dying laughing. Are you sure Biden said that again today?
Yes, I saw it printed.
What a stupid asshole.
Yeah.
Can't believe that. Cheryl Ann Butler says, it is ever so lovely in all seasons. Stacy says, Kushner should have to pay for those tests. That would fix his ass. Oh, I heard also today that the Kushners, that is Jared and Ivanka, increased their wealth while they were working for the White House last year by $169 million. they have to have violated the Constitution of the United States. I know they took some sort of oath. Cheryl Ann Butler says, bury the Tangerine, Trump, and Kushner in the same roadside dish. They says, don't leave out Pompeo and Pence, DeVos, Barr, McConnell, etc., etc. It's going to be a long freaking ditch. Maybe we have to reserve a spot for Pegosi, too. Avril says, I'm surely not voting for Creepy Joe. Louis the Fish Donalfo says, Kushner and Trump are mass murderers, both. Yeah, they are. They are. Steve Wolfman says, me neither. Sharon Butler says, I really don't know what I will do. Well, if you're voting in California, there's no way Trump and Kushner are going to win, okay, in California. So you can vote third party in California. It's an easy vote. Nothing at all Trump can do in a million years to win in California or in New York. Stacy says, I find I am more passionate about the post office than I am about SCOTUS. Well, I won't want to choose between the two. I am passionate about both. The first thing I would do if I became the President of the United States is re-empower the post office, and the second thing I would do is pack the court. Steve Wolfbrand says, and me either, I really don't know. Avril says, that's 8 out of 10. Sherilyn Butler says, I have voted Green since 2012, but I really don't know if I will make it through another 4 years of the Tangerine Furor. But if you're in California, then you won't have to worry about your vote impacting the vote for the Furor, because California is certainly going to go for Biden and not for the Furor. Steve says, not a Dem, so good luck with that. And Louis the Fish Donalfo says, he is it. Kay says, if they adopted Medicare for all, they would win. How stupid and bought and paid for they are. Yes. Cheryl Ann Butler said Obama, but also how arrogant, okay, they are. Because we all know that if they promised Medicare for all, they could find ways to weasel out of it. They could find ways to manipulate out of it. So in other words, they don't care what we think about their constant insistence that they would never vote for Medicare for all, because they think we can't do anything except vote for Biden if we want to avoid seeing Trump win. And since the last thing we want is to see Trump win, they know the problem that they and Trump have been putting us in. Okay, and Louis the Fish Donalfo says, Cheryl Ann says, Obama fined people who couldn't afford health care. He did. And Louis the Fish Donalfo said Biden is dodgy, but any vote otherwise helps Trump. No, that's not true. In other words, a vote otherwise in states that are not swing states, where the outcome is not in doubt, does not help Trump. The reason why is because of our electoral college system. As long as your state is safe for Biden, then you can vote for anyone you want without helping Trump. Steve Gonzo says, Cushy is hashtag A negligent homicide. Stacey Van Veen says Obama's a fucking Republican, a severe disappointment. He is. Steve says the Affordable Care Act is not affordable. I know, whenever they say something is affordable, we automatically know it's not affordable. When they say they want a livable wage, we automatically know it's not livable. We want a living wage, not a livable wage. We want a wage we could live on, actually live on. Okay. Dolores Pierce says, I'm voting Green Party again. Nikki King says, and Biden said he would bring back that fine. That was one of the few good things that Trump did. What? The Green Party? What have I missed? Oh, yeah, he was going to bring back the ACA. Kay says, I don't want more of the idiot, but it would serve Dems right if they lose. The problem is that Trump is worse than an idiot. Biden is an idiot. Trump is worse. Trump is a cruel fascist who doesn't care about human lives other than his own. Trump is Mussolini without half the brains of Mussolini.
He looks like him.
He tries to look like him all the time.
Yeah.
He poses as Mussolini. The Federalist guy, I think his name is Cuccinelli, finally mentioned that Donald Trump should be impeached due to his latest fascist scheme to delay the election. Pelosi should also be singing the same song. I don't think Cuccinelli said that, because I think Cuccinelli is he's in the Trump administration right now. He's very well known here in Virginia. Okay, he came out of Virginia, if I recall correctly. He was the Attorney General here. Terrible, terrible, terrible Attorney General. Awful. He tried to run for governor and got beat good, which was a good thing, because he's a fascist. So I don't think that it's actually Cuccinelli that you're talking about. But the Federalist guy, I think his name is Cuccinelli. No, don't think so. Anyway, Pelosi should be singing the same song, though. Charlene Butler says the ACA is a gift to Big Pharma, Big Insurance. Yes, certainly got a gift to us. Biden sees himself as a continuation of the Obama legacy, laugh out loud. Dolores says they deserve to lose for rigging the primary. They do. Kay says, I agree with that, Dolores. They deserve to lose. Unfortunately, we cannot afford to have them lose. Unless we can develop enough votes for a third party so they both lose, we cannot afford to have the Democrats lose. We have to try to pack the House and the Senate with Democrats who are progressive as much as we can, as we absolutely can. And when it comes to the presidency, we have to make sure that Trump is beaten. Sherilyn Butler says, yep, I hate to say it, it actually pains me, but you were right. Stacey Van Veen says, asshole Jim Clyburn is on MSNBC right now. I only have contempt for him now. Yeah, me too. Clyburn's a sellout. Steve Wolfbrand says, okay, the debate will reveal Biden's severe dementia. We are quite fucked. And Avril says, every time Bernie opens his mouth, he hurts his brand. He hurts his legacy every time he opens his mouth. Well, not every time. Every time he opens his mouth and he talks about Biden and he talks about the campaign. when he talks about the issues, he's still pretty good. And whenever he gets on anywhere with Jeff Weaver, nothing but crap comes out of his mouth. Kate says, I think so too, Steve. Which crazy guy do you want? Cheryl Ann says, I just can't stand it. It's like Dems are trying to lose to their Pied Piper POTUS again with extremely flawed strategy. Steve Wolfbrand said, I'm going with the rapist. Laugh out loud. Cheryl Ann Butler says, which rapist? Kay says, which one, Steve? And Avril says, landlords are mean girls and boys. They can't wait to evict people and lock them out of their places. Sadistic fucks. Steve says, does it matter? Cheryl Ann Butler crying and laughing. Kay says, I don't think so, Steve. Laugh out loud. Steve says, it'll be a month of delay now. If Dijon doesn't veto over the payroll tax. Nah, he's not going to veto. The reason why he's not going to veto is because he needs that unemployment insurance and the eviction moratorium. He knows he needs it to be reelected. Or he thinks he needs it, okay, to be but I don't even think he's going to be reelected even if he gets it. I'm not really worried about that. Cheryl Ann says, hell with $7 trillion wasted. They could have given every man and woman and child $1 million. Would have worked a lot better than what they actually did. You bet. But they insist on giving money to the wrong people. Sharon Ann Butler says, wasted. Hate voice to text. Kate Clark Ryan says, pitchforks are already coming out. The protests, Stacey says, like I said before, my youngest has 2 jobs, both are essential. She gets less hours now due to COVID. If anybody deserved an extra $600 a week, it is she. But just imagine how many others are out there in a similar situation. Steve says, pitchforks are out worldwide. Kay says, I'll get a good lesson on pitchfork, on economics. They need to listen to that podcast, the Nick Hanover's podcast. Carmen says, don't do any good if they can't reach the fascists. Avril says, and fax places are closed, as are state unemployment centers. Steve says, EDD computers are 40 years old here. Kay says, mainframe, ancient computers, right? Kay says, I saw a live report on a protest in front of the LA mayor's house today already. Yeah, there are. Steve says, I got friends there. Avril says, libraries that were doing free faxing were also closed. And Steve Gonzo says, okay, that Louisiana is lit over rents. Yes, it is. There's a strike going on down there. Cheryl Ann Butler says, I have a friend in Washington who was unemployed for 7 weeks. He applied and had no reason not to be approved. He is yet to see even one check and is now back to work already, but behind 2 car payments. It's terrible. They says the systems aren't but neglected. They're designed to break down with any use. And Kay says, yep, I saw that protest in North LA too, which I take it is NOLA. Steve says, don't go out tonight. There's a bad moon on the rise. Mm. And Charlene Butler says, the medical bills should be the last thing people are paying right now. Charlene Butler says, love that song, so do I. Kay says, Star of the Beast has been going on since Reagan, and now it works too well. Stacy says, we haven't got our $1,200 yet. We also were entitled to a tax refund. It's freaking August, and we filed in March. That's incredible. And Avril says, why no $1,200? Sherilyn Butler says, I had to pay this year, so I waited till the last minute. Steve Gonzo said, witches, okay, and demons. Where's witches and demons? Sorry, I scrolled down a little too fast. Lana says, I am reading comments she hasn't seen. Yeah, I know. It is really wacky. It is really wacky. Yes.
If she,
Yeah, Bonnie.
if she didn't get money yet, maybe she should go to the Social Security office.
No, I don't think that's the jurisdiction of Social Security.
Okay.
Okay, I think she has to get to the IRS somehow. I'm sorry, folks. I inadvertently scrolled down and missed a whole bunch of comments. I'm trying to get back to where I was, but I have no idea about the amount of comments. So here it is. Witches and demons and such, oh my. Stacy Van Veen says, I'm supposing since we snail mail filed, it went to Utah of all places. Well, you're supposed to be able to direct it where it's supposed to go to. Alva says, don't forget the reptilians. Steve says, and the Nordic whites, Avril. Avril has a question mark. Lana says, cutting whose videos? Yours? Yeah, cutting new videos of mine, but short videos. Steve says, you'll get that in about 10 years or so. Oh, that cutting whose videos was Lana Dell's comment at 10:32. Steve Wolfburn says, you'll get that in about 10 years. And Steve Gonzo says, don't fall asleep. Who's falling asleep? I'm not falling asleep. Deborah says, that she likes progressive short takes. Stacy says, Firestone's progressive short takes. Nana says, yes, progressive short takes. Yeah, maybe Joe's progressive short takes. Charlene Butler says, quick take, progressive talking points. I commented on that earlier. And Avril says, piss off Donald Trump and call them TikToks. Stacey says, geez, Dr. Joe, you're at the tail end of the comments. Yeah, I was. Kay says, you missed the whole first comments. Steve says, they gave him some lines of cocaine, laugh out loud. Not they, Facebook. Evelina said, not campaigning helped Joe Biden. It did. Kay says, they're now saying he's not going to debate the idiot. Which idiot is not going to debate the other idiot? Is Joe Biden going to avoid Donald Trump in the debates? That would be something. I would laugh at that, actually. I would laugh at that. Evelina says, it hurt Bernie, though. Yes, it did. Lana says, Facebook has gotten wonky. It's gotten woolly, wild and woolly. Alvaro says, Jiffy Pops, quote unquote, short takes. Evelina says, does look like it. Okay, since there's a deserted island we all can go to, we need to blow up this pop stand. Well, if we go there without any COVID, maybe we can go to New Zealand and migrate there. But probably a lot of us are too old for that. They probably don't want old people living off their Social Security system. Evelina says, better yet, banish both parties. Evelina says, to the island. Lana says, we might avoid actually having an uprising if we could enact Bernie's policies. But I think the elected morons won't, and we will have the pitchforks. Kay says, easier to blow this pop stand. Avril says, Nina's presidential material. Anyway, Avril says, AOC/Nina for Prezzo in 2024. Well, we'll see. It's a long time till 2024. And my daughter's here, and she smiled at me. Thank you, Devorah. And Kay said, sorry, Joe, between this junk keyboard and my junk glasses, I have a hard time topping right. Laugh out loud. Nikki King says, Mayor Pete, God forbid. God forbid. He has no principles. Pete Buttigieg would have been his VP. Evelina says, Biden likes him. Kay says, hate him too. Yuck. Mayor Pete. Blech. Lana says, I think Biden would pick John Kasich. Nikki King says, that's a horrible scenario I hadn't considered. Evelina says, everyone would jump ship if Paris became president. Laugh out loud. What did he say? If Hillary is VP, Joe will slip on a banana peel and break his neck. Steve Gonzo, Joe, please clap, quote unquote, Biden. Romano left an emoji that I can't see. Lana said, yes, if he said that again, he needs to be put in the stocks so we can chuck rotten fruit at him in public. How tone deaf can you get? And Steve says, Trump, 40 million, 24 million from a DC hotel. Alvaro says, I missed what stupid a-holes say again. Said again. I think what he said again was that he was going to vote against Medicare. He was going to veto Medicare for all if it came to him when he was president. That's what Barney says that he said again. I'm having a hard time really believing it. Cheryl Ann Butler says, I'm having a hard time in believing anybody would be that stupid. Cheryl Ann Butler says, I'm in Washington State. Evelina says, you're being too polite. Lana laugh out loud. Alvaro says, he would still veto Medicare for all. Evelina says, Dr. Joe for president 2020. If you voted me in for president without campaigning like Joe Biden, then I would only serve one term. I might not even get through that. But, okay, if you did vote for me for the nomination of the Democratic Party, then I would select Nina Turner as my VP. Alvaro says, and Bonnie is first lady. Evelyn says, too much class, laugh out loud. Alvaro says, thanks a lot. Evelina says, if he sat there long enough, the insects and birds would come along. And think of the other animals. That would be semi-medieval torture. And Kay says, I don't think Ohio is a swing state. Evelina says, well, actually, Ohio is currently turning towards Biden. Yes, I think Trump is behind in Ohio right now. Evelyn says, sit there that long, you think he's already rotten. She says, rotten, laugh out loud, and rotten, LOL. And Kay says, my mother never worked in her life after she married my dad. He worked at Repulsive Steel, he called it, most of his life. And Lana said, Dr. Joe, you're reading comments I cannot see. Facebook is wacky. I know. So the Green Party finally gets a viable shot, and they nominate Howie. As exciting as watching paint dry. Fuck those idiots. Yeah, you know who they should have nominated? Either Margaret Flowers or Kevin Zeese. Those are great people from the Green Party with guts galore. They would be great people. And Steve Gonzo says, Lincoln Project called to impeach. Avril said, could have been another Cuch type name. Steve Wolfbrand said, I bank with Shitty Bank. Sherilyn Butler says, yeah, I wanted Dario Hunter. I wasn't sure about Dario. I wasn't really enamored with either one of them. I preferred Rodolfo Cortez Barragan and also Kenneth Mejia, both very promising young people, okay, in the Green Party. And I also thought that Kevin Zeese, okay, and Margaret Flowers would have made really terrific Green Party candidates, both as strong as can be,
Yeah.
both fire eaters, always out there in the streets. Steve Wolprandt. I mean, Green New Deal and Medicare for All, they would show you a Green New Deal like you never dreamed. Steve Wolfbrand, sometimes known as Citibank. Yes, I know it's known as Citibank. Steve DeVore says, hi, everyone. Hey, Steve DeVore, you're late. Steve Wolfbrand said, I wanted Jesse Ventura. Yeah, Jesse would have been a gas. And Kay says, big banks suck. Had a hell of an experience with Bank of America. Avril said, I apologize, I was way off. It's Stephen Calabrese, co-founder of the Federalist Society, calls for DT to be impeached. Now, there is someone who is consistent. Stephen Calabrese is consistent. Take note, John Roberts. Stephen Calabrese has called for Donald Trump to be impeached. Steve Wolfbrand says Doc has his finger on the pulse of the American people. And oh, I scrolled down too fast again. And Stephen DeVore said, I had my experience with Wells Fargo Mortgage. They're liars. A lot of people had experience with liars. Steve Gonza says, Justin, Karen's last name is Kabuki, and there's a bunch of government, the Kabuki Karens. Avril Mana says, the Fed government did hire a lot of customer service for economic impact checks issues. Sherilyn Butler says she likes progressive quick takes. Yeah, maybe progressive quick takes is really good.
I like that.
I like that. Sherilyn Butler says, I'm down for New Zealand. Steve Wolfbrand says, the debate will be the best comedy since it's a mad world. Nikki King says, can't stand the Weasley little fuck, but Joe likes him, and he needs the gay vote. I don't think Joe needs to appoint anybody to have the gay vote because the alternative is Donald J. Trump. Who is more anti-gay than Donald J. Trump? I mean, I think Donald Trump is worse to gay than he is to blacks and Hispanics. Sherilyn Butler says, well, the debates will be a huge cruel joke between a mumbling, bumbling idiot and that loudmouth tangerine tweeter. That loudmouth lying tangerine tweeter. Lying Don. Lying tangerine Don. Steve, we are living in a bad episode of The Twilight Zone, says Kay. Avril says, hope Slick Willie gets the hot seat over the pedo island situation, so HRC slithers back into the woods for good. Stephen DeVore says, I don't understand why the government is against Medicare for all. I thought they were elected to help the people. Stupid me. You're just living in the past. Kay says, did you see that effing Clinton bill thanked Clyburn, actually it's Clyburn, for screwing Bernie in SC? No, I didn't see that he thanked. Yes, I guess he did because he thanked him for saving the party from Bernie, from the socialists, the dangerous socialists. Big pharma and the healthcare industry ring a bell. Stacy says, I love Dr. Flowers. Kevin hates it when I refer to him as her boyfriend. Laugh out loud. Well, Kevin's the lawyer, Margaret's the doctor. Yes, Kay, I did. I was furious. And Avril says, what about Ajamu Baraka? Is he still agreeing? I think he is still agreeing. And by the way, he would make a very, very good president. I don't know how good a candidate he would make, but he would make a very, very good president. He would stop the regime change wars. He would scale down the defense establishment, but quite greatly. The only reservation I have about him is that he's weak in the MMT area, but so is Howie Hawkins. And Ajamu would make a much more impressive presidential candidate. He has real gravitas. Steve Wolfbrand says, I don't think Kenneth or Rodolfo are old enough to run for POTUS. Steve, I think you're right. I wasn't thinking of that. I think that's right. I think they're both, I don't even know if either of them are 30 yet. All I know is they're great people. Okay, Nikki King says, I wish we could take over the Bull Moose Party. Steve says, old enough, sorry. Oh, are they old enough? I don't think they're old enough, are they? Stacy says, but Pence is more anti-gay, methinks. Yeah, I don't know. Nikki says, Joe is as much a Republican as Donald. Well, he may be as much a Republican as Donald, but he's not as much of a fascist as Donald. Charlene Butler says, but Donald is horrible to everyone. He lies every time his mouth opens. That's just a given. It's just a given, but it's still Lion Don. Lion Tangerine Don. I like it. So Lana says, gee, these comments are quite the comedy show tonight. Steve says, Bill Clinton's been spotted on Pedo Island by 2 people now. Okay, and Rebecca McClaskey says, hello, Joe. Did you do a talk about the federal agents coming into the states? I've not found one. Yes, I've done a few talks on that. If you go to YouTube and you check my channel, okay, on YouTube out, you should be able to easily access within the last 2 weeks at least a couple of shows on the federal agents going into the states. Okay. There may have been as many as 3 or 4. I don't know. I did a lot on that, and I'm still doing it, still talking about it. Steve says, big time. Charlene Butler says, socialism is evil unless it's for billionaires, don't you know? That's trouble. I do know. And Rick says, K night, all take care. Yeah, good night, Rick. Thanks for coming. Evelina says, but Lonadell, highly disgusting. And Rebecca says, I would vote for him for sure. And Dolores Pierce says, good night, Richard. I think Richard prefers to be called Rick. And Steve says, does Nina MMT? I'm sure Nina is buds with Stephanie Kelton. I am real sure that Nina is buds with Stephanie Kelton. Avril says, our very own SNL. I think that if Nina became the president of the United States, Stephanie Kelton would be the chief of the National Economics Council. Avril Mano, our very own Saturday Night Live. And Kay says, not sure on that, Steve. That's Steve Gonzo that she's referring to this time. Steve Wolfman said, I worked my ass off on one Mejia campaign. I don't regret it. And Steve Gonzo says, Netflix, Monday, a 6-part Border Patrol series. That's going to be a pretty important series, I think. Pretty important series. Any more comments? I have caught up to your comments. Steve Gonzo says, Immigration Nation. And it was Steve Gonzo who pointed to the Netflix series on Monday. I just said Steve, I didn't say Steve Gonzo. I have to distinguish between Steve Wolfbrandt and Steve Gonzo and Steve DeVore. We got a lot of Steves. And Cheryl Ann says it's on my watch list. And Nikki King said, did you see all this? It's about the 2008 crash. I'm not sure I saw that particular one, but I'm full of knowledge about the 2008 crash. I lived through the 2008 crash. I was blogging about the 2008 crash. I was blogging about the recovery. I was blogging about the Obama administration stuff. I wrote so much. For a while, I was blogging 3 blogs a day on that stuff. And Carmen was saying, going on over 2 hours and 24 minutes. Yes. But it's worth every second, even if we have to discuss the depravity of what's going on. Steve Wolfbrand says, sleep well, friends. And Nikki says it's coming out on the 5th. Dolores Pierce says, you too. Kay says, thank you for another great discussion. I live for these discussions with all of you. Love you all. Cheryl Ann Butler says, thank you for another good one. Joe, thank you, Cheryl Ann, for coming. And, of course, another welcome to you, except I think you've been here now a few times already, and I hope you'll stay around. We really enjoy your comments. And Avril says, feeling it. The con is with Bill Black. Stacy says, and Avril says, feeling it. Nikki says, that's great show. Watch it on the 5th and let us know how they did. If it's Bill Black, he did real good.
Yeah.
Believe me. I don't have to see it to know how Bill Black did. Yeah, Bill Black was my editor for a while on the New Economic Perspectives blog. His blogs are wonderful in themselves, and Bill is an absolutely great guy, absolutely first class. But he is a very, very slow editor, and so I left because when I did a blog, it was current on that day, and I couldn't wait for 3-day turnaround time on my blogs. So I moved things to my own blog, so I wouldn't have that. Lana says, the con. Yes, looking forward to it. And Laura says, thank you and good night. Cheryl Ann says, be well, everyone. And Lana says, good night, folks. And Avril says, night. And Cheryl Ann says, abso-fucking-lutely, love it here. And Nikki King says, awesome. Thank you all for coming. On that awesome note, I'm going to end this live stream. See you on Tuesday, but you may see, hopefully you'll see some videos from me, at least one video on Monday.